No, David, I don't want you to delete your channel because I enjoy freedom of speech and I also encourage freedom of speech. I would love to have that debate with you one day.
Neither read nor write, i.e., Muhammad, whom they find written with them in the Torah, and the Injil, Gospel. M.H. Shakir, those who follow the apostle prophet, the Ummi, whom they find written down with them in the Torah and the Injil. Sher Ali, those who follow the messenger, the prophet, the Ummi, whom they find mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel which are with them. Palmer, who follow the apostle, the illiterate prophet, whom they find written down with them in the law and the gospel. So, Allah declares in the Quran that there are Jews and Christians who decide to follow Muhammad because we find him mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel. Notice, Allah specifically refers to the Torah and the Gospel that are with us. Allah is talking about Jews and Christians during the 7th century and the Torah and the Gospel that they had with them during the 7th century. In the Torah and the Gospel which are with them, whom they find written with them, whom they find written down with them, in the Torah and the Gospel which are with them, written down with them in the law and the Gospel. We have copies of the Torah and the Gospel from before the time of Muhammad. We have copies of the Torah and the Gospel from after the time of Muhammad. We know what the Torah and the Gospel of the 7th century said because they're the same Torah and Gospel we have with us today. So here's my question for Muslims. And if you can answer my question, I will delete my entire channel. Where do we find Muhammad mentioned in the Torah and the Gospel that are with us? Where do we find any clear reference to Muhammad in the Torah and the Gospel that are with us? Show me a clear reference to Muhammad in the Torah and the Gospel that isn't calling Muhammad a false prophet, and I will delete my channel.
David, to your challenge. First of all, show me a complete Hebrew Bible from the 7th century. 7th century. 7th century. Show me a complete Hebrew Bible from the 7th century. That was the era of the Prophet Muhammad, right? So give me a full copy of the Hebrew manuscript of the Gospel and of the Old Testament from the 7th century, a complete one. Can you come up with that, my dear friend? No, 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 you can't. That's the problem, my dear friend. You don't believe me? Well, I'll prove it to you in a minute. But I will leave the other explanations to my other Muslim brothers who do come up with some explanations of showing some verses from the Bible, including this, the Song of Solomon, where they will tell you that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was mentioned. But I will not go down that way because that argument will never end. But let's seal it off, yeah? Let's seal it off once and for all. You don't have a complete version of the Bible in Hebrew in any manuscripts you can come up with where you can say that this is the complete Hebrew manuscript of the Old Testament or of the Gospel. You can't do that. So I'm pretty sure, like always, you always change your versions. You have so many versions, you keep on taking words out, replacing one word with the other. You know this, I don't have to tell you. It's a Christian thing. You always take out words from the Bible, including the word begotten from the King James Version, and you have the RSV version, and so many versions. It's your habit, and also to take things out from one chapter and to put it to another chapter. You conflate Bible chapters into different, versions. You put two chapters together into a different chapter, blah, blah, blah. It's long history. But nevertheless, to your challenge, you can't come out with a complete Hebrew Bible because Jesus' language, his mother tongue was Hebrew Aramaic. So I'm not going to budge for any other translation, Greek or Syriac or whatever. But it's still, let's find out whether you have even that. But you should be thankful to the Muslims for giving you some old manuscripts and translations of the gospel and bringing them to Europe. Do you know the history? How the Umayyads and later on the Emirates of Cordoba enriched you with some translations of the Bible? Do you know this, David? So, if you can't show your complete manuscript in Hebrew from the 7th century or a complete manuscript in Arabic from the 7th century of the Hebrew Bible or of the Gospel, then I can't prove otherwise, can I? Because Prophet Muhammad's language was Arabic. So he was talking to the people of his time, to the Christians who were speaking in Arabic, right? Show me. Baina wa bainakum, as the Arabic goes. Baina wa bainakum. David.
No, David, you don't have the complete Bibles from the 7th century. You don't, my dear man. You haven't done your history research well. So let's find out. The Aleppo Codex, which was dated 920 Christian era, and the Leningrad Codex, dated 1008 Christian era, were once the oldest known manuscripts of the Tanakh in Hebrew, right? So, dear man, until 1947, the Aleppo Codex and the Leningrad Codexes were the oldest manuscripts. But what happened in 1947? In 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found at Qumran. Now, is that complete, my dear friend? No. That was composed, as we know, between 150, before Christ to 70 years before Christ. But what do we have from Dead Sea Scrolls? In this Dead Sea Scrolls, we know that before this discovery, the earliest extant of manuscripts of the Old Testament were in Greek, right? And in manuscripts such as the Codex of Vaticanus and the Codex of Sinaiticus were the earliest extant manuscripts, right? Out of the roughly 800 manuscripts found at Qumran, 220 are from the Tanakh. Every book, I understand, of the Tanakh is represented except the book of Esther. However, most are fragmentary, my dear friend. Notably, there are 2 scrolls of the book of Isaiah, one complete and one around 75% complete. Right? So, as far as the Dead Sea Scroll goes, you can check it out. So let's move on. Let's find out what is happening in between that period of time and what is the oldest New Testament that we can find in manuscripts. Well, we can hardly find any surviving complete Hebrew gospel from the 7th century. Now, do we have some Greek or Syriac or Slavic or Gothic or Ethiopic or Coptic or Armenian complete manuscripts? Well, let's say that we have, but what do we have? Due to the prevalence of manuscript caches, scholars today are more likely to find incomplete and sometimes conflicting segments of manuscripts rather than complete and largely consistent works. Did you hear that? Do I have to read it out to you again? Because I'm reading it from a scholarly authority. Due to the prevalence of manuscript caches, scholars today are more likely to find incomplete and sometimes conflicting segments of manuscripts rather than complete and largely consistent works. When are you going to learn, David? But anyway, I don't want you to delete your channel. You have worked hard to befool us, but it is not making any headway, is it?